Hello and welcome to episode 50 of the Gamers Tavern. I'm recording this real fast just as before I pack up all the recording gear because we're at Comic Palooza this weekend in Houston, Texas. Ross and I will both be there and we're recording an episode live on Monday. Check the schedule for time and room number. You can also find Ross running a bunch of different panels and a bunch of different games all over the weekend. And I'll be wandering around covering the show for Ain't It Cool News and recording bits here and there for Gamers Tavern. You may actually want to keep an eye on our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Gamers Tavern Show, just in case we're able to stream something from the convention. But if you're in the Houston area or anywhere nearby Houston, Louisiana, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, go, trust me, go to comicpalooza.com. It is the biggest convention in the South. It is the San Diego Comic-Con of the South. You will regret it if you are not there. Speaking of regrets, if you don't enter this contest, you're going to regret it because we have Chris Avalone on the show hosting episode 48 about the pen and paper role-playing game they made to test the rules of Fallout 3 during the Van Buren design. He's giving away 3 copies of these one-of-the-kind notes to lucky Gamers Tavern listeners. To enter, send us an email at contest@gamerstavern.org with the subject line Nuka Break. In the body, give us your best Fallout-themed haiku. Be sure to include your mailing address so we can send you this unique piece of gaming history. And get your entries in by midnight on May 31st, 2015 to be eligible to win. Once again, the email address is contest@gamerstavern.org with the subject line Nuka Break, the body, a Fallout haiku, and your mailing address. With that said, grab a drink from the bar and take a seat at the table in the corner, and we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor. What is the most important invention in all of mankind? Beer! Longtime listeners will know how much I love good alcohol, but when it comes to craft beers, there's so much out there it can be intimidating. What's the difference between a brown ale and an IPA? And why is there so much German, Hefeweizen, Bock, Dunkel? Where do you start? I'll tell you where. Craft Beer Club. For just $3 each, you'll get 3 bottles of 4 different beers right to your door every single month from independent craft brewers of the best quality. In just a short amount of time, you'll be snobbing up with the hipsters talking about nose and hops. But Daryl, I can get a 12-pack cheaper at the local store, you say. But can you get specialty regional small batch beers at that price with this much selection? I didn't think so. Besides, you know you'd spend twice that much at a bar for the same beers just to try them out. So go to gamerstavern.org/craft beer club and we'll start you out with your first shipment plus 3 free gifts. That's gamerstavern.org/craft beer club and start enjoying real beer.
The Gamers Tavern podcast is sponsored by Pinnacle Entertainment Group's Savage Worlds game, featuring Deadlands, 50 Fathoms, East Texas University, Weird Wars, and dozens of fantastic licensees. Savage Worlds is fast, furious, and fun. Welcome to another edition of the Gamers Tavern podcast with our guest, Stan. Hi, I'm your host, Ross Watson.
And I'm Daryl Mott Jr.
And say hello to our guest, Stan.
Hi, guests. Hi, I'm Stan.
Welcome to the show, Stan, and thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So tonight, we're going to be talking about another campaign setting. We have a few shows that have actually covered campaign settings before. 4 Dungeons & Dragons, 4 other role-playing games. We've covered, let's see, what have we covered so far, Daryl? We've covered Forgotten Realms, and we've covered Birthright.
And Dark Sun.
That's right, with actually Tim Brown.
Yep.
That must have been exciting.
It was excellent.
And
Tim's a lot of fun. I got to go listen to that because, I mean, I get to, I see him a couple times a year, but that's never enough Tim.
We also got Rich Baker for the Birthright one, too. So we try to get as many creators as possible for these particular ones, which is why we reached out to you. One of the first...
I found that very funny.
Well, on here on the show, one of the first things we like to do with a new guest is we like to introduce them to our listeners through the context of a gaming character sheet. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, and where they might know you from in that context?
Well, got probably strength 10. I'm not quite sure how you go about this, but yeah, I've been around a lot of different companies and products, but I guess the one we're talking about tonight is going to be Ravenloft, right?
Well, sure, but you're probably like a level 20 cartoonist, isn't that right?
So I had a very weird career. Very good for me, but weird in that it's kind of hard to nail down. I've been a game designer and editor. Worked at West End Games on the Master Book line and on the old D6 Star Wars. Actually, as a graphic designer for most of that, but also as an editor for Paranoia. And then I went to TSR, where I worked on Ravenloft and Dragonlance during the Dragonlance 5th Age. I was a lead designer for a lot of that. I didn't do the initial design, but on a lot of the supplemental material, I was a designer or on the team.
Right.
And
so you were saying that you've been involved in a lot of different campaign settings, particularly Dragonlance, very deeply involved in Dragonlance.
Yes.
And with, of course, the other things like a Pokemon Junior adventure game.
Yeah, I got it for a while, doing a lot of work on games for introductory games.
Right.
I forgot that was a thing.
My favorite thing, well, I really love the game, but one of my favorite things when talking about it is to roll out by some measure, that's the best-selling role-playing game of all time.
That's a good point.
We sold 800,000 units of that in 1 year.
Shit.
Wow.
And nothing touches that.
No,
now, it had no carrying power, right? It would be ridiculous to really make that claim, but by one very, very thin measure, there it is.
Wow. That's actually a great piece of trivia to roll out, I think, from time to time.
I'm locking that one away.
Now, I want to ask you a really quick question here, Stan. You worked on the D6 Star Wars game over West End. Did you by any chance know there's a person I worked with who at Fantasy Flight Games who worked at West End maybe around the same time period, Brian Schomburg.
Brian and I were housemates when I was working at West End. So yeah, I'm pretty familiar with Brian.
Okay, well, there you go. So 6 degrees of separation from Stan is actually only 2 for me because Brian Schomburg and I worked together on an awful lot of stuff. So that's fantastic. Of course, D6 Star Wars is a thing that both Daryl and I are big fans of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
What was your favorite thing to work on for D6 Star Wars?
Well, when I was working on that, like I said, I was mostly doing graphic design.
Mm-hmm.
I say my career falls into like 4 different buckets. And so I was doing graphic design at that point. I was doing maps for the Star Wars Adventure Journal and doing just basic layout for the Star Wars products that were coming through at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I really kind of cut my graphics teeth on that, doing the different starport designs and other maps that went into the products, and particularly the Adventure Journal.
Fantastic. Now, you're no stranger to podcasting either.
I've done a couple. I've always wanted to have a podcast of my own. A podcast of my own. The funny thing is that I don't know if you know who Jeff Quick is. Jeff was one of the guys in RPGA for a long time, and then came up and was a designer and editor in R&D at Wizards. And he is now, I think it's Yellow Games, the guys who do King of New York.
Okay.
And he's basically running their development team now. Mm-hmm. But Jeff and I, back in the early days of these internets, wanted to do what we were just calling, an internet radio show, because the word podcast didn't even exist. And we tried for months to try and put something together and just didn't have the technical know-how and gave up. And like 6 months later, podcasts were the hottest things. And it broke my heart. I never had the will to try it again.
That is
so I just get on other people's shows and, get my fill.
Now, you've been on a number of videos online. I think one of them is where you're talking about living in Japan.
Yes. I lived in Japan for 5 years in the early 90s. Among other things, I was a co-founder of a English language gaming organization, which is one of the big things on my resume that got me a full-time job in the industry.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, with some other folks there, teamed up and did an organization that's called the Japan's International Gamers Guild, or JIG, and so I was the first president of JIG, and like I say, one of the founders, and we put that together. It was a group for anyone who was living in Japan that spoke English and liked gaming. And one of the things I'm actually really proud of is JIG is still around today. It has far outlived my involvement. And the organization thrives and is online. And one of the original founders is still there and still doing a big part of running it. And so it was, yeah.
So now you've gone from graphic design, you've gone to editing, you've done cartooning, you've been a creative content manager at Upper Deck.
Yes.
And
I was also a creative director at Wizards.
Right. That's got to be a really exciting job.
It is. Like I say, that's another bucket for me, right? That's where you've got to be able to let other people do the work, right? There's some people who just can't give up the doing the work. But if you can, being involved at kind of the high end creatively and helping other people to produce more products than I personally could ever make myself. I now feel like I've got my hands in, at least creatively, and have an involvement, a satisfying involvement with development of products for all kinds of different things that I never would have gotten to on my own.
All right. And the last couple things I want to mention is more recent stuff with the Super Genius games.
Now it's Rogue Genius Games.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes. But yeah, go ahead.
But you were.
I was. I was a founding member of both organizations.
That's a former guest and friend of the show, Owen Stevens' company, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, Rogue Genius is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Super Genius was started by Hiram Savage and me shortly after I got laid off from Upper Deck. It's kind of a repeating pattern in my career. I got laid off by Wizards, and I was part of the group that started the Game Mechanics, which was like I say, a PDF producing company back in the early 2000s. Got laid off by Upper Deck and created Super Genius. And when we decided to kind of lean heavily on Pathfinder, we invited Owen to join the company. And when things at Super Genius were wrapping up, Owen decided that he wasn't done yet, and so he invited me to join Rogue Genius.
Well, yeah, Owen is a great guy. I've actually spent a lot of time with him at Comic Palooza last year, which is a con I'll be going to again very, very soon. So
me too.
Oh, you're going to be there. Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a gaming guest of some sort.
Well, fantastic. That is going to be amazing because that weekend is actually my 40th birthday.
Oh, sweet.
I did not know that.
So yeah, so both Daryl and I and you will all be in the same hotel that weekend. So we're going to have to get together and hang out.
Getting drunk at the same time.
Yes. So Stan and Daryl and I are all going to be at Comic Palooza, and I think also going to be at Comic Palooza. Just joining us now is our second guest for the night, Mr. William Thrasher.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Will. Welcome to the show again.
Glad to be back.
Now, is it true you will also be at Comic Palooza?
Yes, I will be at Comic Palooza.
Well, fantastic. You're representing Skirmisher Publishing, is that correct?
Yeah, I'll be working with Skirmisher Publishing. I'll be heavily involved with their gaming pavilion and also bringing some live-action role-playing in as well. Fantastic.
Now, just like last year, I'm sure that the absolute best party to go to is going to be the Skirmisher after party.
Is there another party?
Please.
Oh, yes, there is.
Oh, thank God.
Oh, good. I got to put that on my schedule then.
Oh, Stan, you've got to go, dude.
We would not let another year. We would not let a year go by where we didn't do that party.
I was just telling Stan, actually, this weekend, the 22nd of May, which is Comic Palooza, is also my 40th birthday. So we're going to have to get together, all four of us, I'm sure, at some point and raise a beer. So I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent.
So, Will, you've been on the show before. Just as a really quick breakdown for our listeners, do you think you could do a quick gaming character sheets of who you are and who we know you from?
Oh, certainly. Well, I've been a longtime gamer since high school, but recently I've been a professional freelance illustrator and game designer. One of the co-creators of Kettlefish Productions. We do LARPs and other special game conventions all over the country. Origins, Gen Con, Comic Palooza, just like you mentioned.
Right. And, of course.
Man, that was good. I was mad. I don't want to do mine again. Never mind.
Well, Will also has one of the most buttery smooth radio voices in the industry. So.
Oh God, he's also,
thank you.
if I'm not mistaken, the host of the D Infinity show. Is that correct? The webcast.
Yes, I'm one of the co-hosts of D Infinity Live, which you can watch on d-infinity.net. And it's a weekly tabletop gaming show, and we riff on different tabletop gaming topics. We have usually one topic per episode. I don't know when this particular episode of Gamers Tavern is coming out, but the episode we're prepping for now is called Let's Play Humans, and it's all about playing human beings in settings where there are plenty of non-human character options.
Oh, shit, Ross, we need to steal that one. Now, there has been a lot of overlap in topics, but it's completely, theirs is a video, ours is audio, and the what gets covered is completely different on the two shows. I almost consider D Infinity Live an inspiration for the Gamers Tavern.
Well, we've been on the Infinity Live before, and of course, Will's joined us before, so we have like a little bit of incestuous relationship going on there.
There's plenty of cross-pollination.
A little bit of Game of Thrones going on.
I need a grown-up.
I am an adult.
Now, Will, of course, has written for everything from Pathfinder to Chupacabras for Cthulhu Live, 100 Oddities for Wizard's Library. And he worked for me for a little while, writing for Warhammer 40K products like Into the Storm and the Aculus Assault.
Indeed, I did.
Okay. So that is where everybody knows everybody from. And let's jump into the next part of our show, which is all about what we've been playing lately. I would like to start with Stan.
Okay.
What have you been playing lately?
Well, last night I actually played a little bit of World War I dogfighting board game, Wings of War.
Oh, yeah. That's a fun one.
We had a regular Monday night group, which started about a year and a half ago as a D&D 5th edition playtest group. We kept playing and finally finished the big campaign we've been on and decided just to keep going. So now we're on a break doing board games instead of role-playing for a while. But I'm also in a regular Call of Cthulhu game where we have managed to pretty well play campaign style, keep most of the same characters. Occasionally one will just go around the bend and have to be replaced.
I was about to say, how does that work, a Call of Cthulhu campaign? That's like antithesis.
A lot of what we've been playing has been the stuff that Goodman Games has been putting out. The pulp Cthulhu, pulp inspired stuff. One of our people is a guy named John Ratliff, who is an editor for TSR and Wizards for a long time and a Tolkien scholar. If you watch actually any of the Hobbit or Lord of the Rings DVDs and you go through the extras, he's very often in there as someone they bring in for interviews. But he has a lot of, he's also a big Cthulhu fan, and he will take old material and adapt it, old gaming material, like some of the Alone Against the Night, one-player stuff, and adapt it for a group. Or I've run the stuff that we published as Super Genius, published some Call of Cthulhu stuff, so I've run a little bit of that. I think particularly the Super Genius stuff, our goal was to make things where it felt like Lovecraftian stuff, but it was possible for the characters to survive if they didn't do anything dumb, so you could play a campaign.
Okay.
I think that's my problem, is my characters always do something dumb.
It's so much fun.
And classically, a lot of the Cthulhu adventures are written so that in the end, it's supposed to be apocalyptic, one way or either for the world or for your character.
All right.
But the Goodman game stuff is also products that if your characters are smart, they can live through it and be alive for the next one. So we play that, and then I'm in a every other week game with the folks at Monty Cook Games. We're playing a Numenera variant. Something that I think is one of the test concepts that they had for the new Cipher System core book, which they announced recently. So it's using the basic Cipher System, but this is a sci-fi game, like a space opera sci-fi game instead of the standard Numenera.
Interesting.
I'm actually going to switch gears a little bit and go with Daryl because I want to hear about his characters doing things that are dumb. Daryl, what have you been up to lately in terms of playing games?
Well, we've had a little bit of a recording hiatus, so I have been playing all the games. I actually got back into video gaming because I started really paying attention to our Twitch channel, which is at twitch.tv/Gamers Tavern Show. I've been playing a little bit of Shadowrun Returns, been playing some Skyrim, tried playing some Star Trek Online, but I realized I fly a ship like I drive a car, which there's a reason why I don't drive. So I don't know if I'm going to be sticking with that, but I might give it another shot or two.
Well, remember, you need to get in touch with me before you come on Star Trek Online. I can probably help you out with a few things.
Probably. I went through I went through the tutorial stuff, and I think it was like 3 a.m. when I messaged you and said, hey, I'm starting Star Trek Online. Is there anything I should know? And he's like, play a human, and I'm going to bed. So, but yeah, I went through the tutorial on that. I've also been playing, I've been running a 5th edition D&D campaign on there. It's another running through Lost Mines of Phandelver, the starter set for the 5th edition D&D, the adventure that came with that. That's Richard Baker's, if I'm not mistaken, adventure he wrote.
I think it is. I don't know for sure, but maybe.
Red Handed Doom.
Yeah, that's the same guy.
Richard Baker, yeah. That's his adventure. I just love it. It's a great introductory adventure. We've been running through that. We also did International Tabletop Day. I'm just going to run through the games I played real quick on that. Double feature. By the way, former guest friend of the show, John Kovalik, made this game. It is an amazing movie-based game. You don't have to know trivia. You just have to have seen movies to be able to play this game. It is an absolutely great party game. Make sure to pick that up. It's just now coming out in store shelves. We played some epic game of Munchkin. Boss Monster is an amazing game. I absolutely love it. It is so great. And there were a couple other games too, but I'm spacing on them right now, and I've been rambling for too long anyway.
Oh, so, okay then.
I've been shoehorning an entire year of recording the show, and every time it's like, I haven't really had much time to play. And now I'm just like, I played all the games in like 2 months.
I'm saving myself for last because I have a lot to talk about too, but Will Thrasher, what have you been playing lately?
Well, I was actually involved in something really cool. So as some people may know, I live in the state capital of Frankfort, Kentucky. And just this past weekend, the Kentucky Derby was going on. So I was brought into our friendly local game store, Moonlight Comics, to do a special event. Now, have any of you played D&D Attack Wing?
No.
I haven't, but I played the other attack.
I've played X-Wing, though.
Okay, cool. Well, then you already have some idea how it works. Well, they have a really big D&D Attack Wing following at that store. So I did a special event for them. We did the Dragon Derby.
Nice.
We set up a racetrack, 4 players at a time. Each got one unnamed dragon, and they had to compete to actually race around the track and see who could cross the finish line first. But of course, being dragons, they could still attack each other under the normal combat rules as they're racing around the track. And what we did to really keep things interesting is at the end of every round, we had a random racing event card. And each one would sort of change the game. We had like the gravity curse card where all the dragons were forced to land and had to operate on the ground for 1 turn. My 2 favorite event cards, though, one was called Hand of the Trickster God, where the direction of the race is reversed. So whoever was in last place is now in first place. Whoever was in first place is now in last place.
Wow.
But you've still got to get your bulky, cumbersome dragon turned around so you can get to that finish line. And then the other one, because I'm a huge Mario Kart fan, we had a random event card called Blue Shell, where the person who was in last place got to make a breath attack against the person in first place, regardless of their actual positions on the board.
Nice.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun, and the shop was nice enough to offer a $50 gift certificate for the winner, so everybody got raffle tickets based on how well they did in each race, and then at the end of the day, we had a drawing. It was really cool.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm actually talking with them about for an upcoming Star Wars event to take the X-Wing miniature game and to do a Kessel Run, where it'll be kind of a non-linear race. There'll be specific zones on the board they've got to get to, but they get to pick the order.
Nice. What else have you been playing? Is that the big thing, or is there more?
That has been the big thing. Oh, and actually, I was at the week before that, I was at a local convention, and did something I try to do any local convention. We do Arkham Horror with all the trimming. So on Saturday night, we set up Arkham Horror with every expansion in play.
Oh,
Wow.
And that was very fun. And it was I don't remember who the elder god we were up against was, but he ended up awakening, and we managed to win the game with one investigator still in play.
Wow.
It was a really fun 2.5 hours.
Now, really quick, what are you running at Comicpalooza game-wise?
Well, I'm running a couple of things. I'll be running lots of different pickup games at the Skirmisher Game Pavilion. So I'll be running some Pathfinder stuff, some Call of Cthulhu stuff, board game I'm working on called Relier Rises. I'll be helping out with the Little Orc Wars. But the three big gaming events that I'm a part of, I'm going to be running 2 Cthulhu Live events. One being the Return of Cyrus Crane, which is just a classic Cthulhu Live scenario that I think I've been running for almost 10 years now, which just has a little bit of everything you'd want to have in a Cthulhu event. A little bit of some tomes, some monsters, various things, a period setting. Then the other one I'm running is, of course, Muerte al Chupacabras, which is a Cthulhu Live scenario. It's set in the modern day, and it's all inspired by cryptozoology. A crazy rancher claims to have captured a real live chupacabra and has it chained barn. Now, he has something chained up in his barn, but it may not necessarily be the mythical chupacabra.
Nice.
And so there's lots of fun complications. And so, like, it kind of draws from a couple of different things. It draws from cryptozoology. It draws some influences from the X-Files and Twin Peaks and things like that. So that one's really fun. And then the other one, which is going to be really interesting, we're doing a live-action dungeon crawl called The Labyrinths of Midnight.
Nice.
Which I've been taking the lead on. And the whole reason it came about is last year at Comicpalooza, Michael Varhola, the head of Skirmisher Publishing, and I, we had to get somewhere in the convention, and it was really late in the evening, and we got lost on the 3rd floor of the convention center because it's just the hallways. It's big. And it's not laid out in the most intuitive way. And one of us, I forget who, had just made a crack that, well, this would be the perfect place to get ambushed by a minotaur. That's kind of what got the ball rolling. So we're actually going to have a huge section of the top floor of the convention center late at night. It'll be played through midnight. And the hallways in that part of the convention center are, for all intents and purposes, our dungeon. And the different conference rooms and meeting rooms and ballrooms there, we're going to turn each one of those into a sort of fantasy set piece. And all of our players are going to be doing an actual dungeon crawl, doing quests, trying to safely navigate between those different set piece locations.
Well, I'm glad to see you guys are taking it easy this year. You're not doing anything ambitious.
Laying back and having a vacation.
It's nice to relax for once.
Now, Stan, are you running any games at Comicpalooza?
I don't have any games on the schedule. I've got a whole bunch of seminars.
Yeah, me too.
Depending on how my deadlines go between now and then, I may bring some stuff to kind of play in open gaming or throw out as a special and last minute thing.
Well, Daryl and I are going to be recording at the show.
Yep.
And I think I'm going to actually start out by talking about what I've been playing lately with what I'm going to be doing at Comicpalooza, because like you, Stan, I am on a bunch of panels. In fact, we're probably on a bunch of the same panels.
That would make sense.
But I'm also bringing some RPGs to play there. I'm bringing my Shadows Angelus setting, which is cyberpunk cops fighting demons in a dark future. And I have the Great Hunt, which is a Star Wars Edge of the Empire adventure I'm running that's going to tie into some of the X-Wing events there.
Mm-hmm.
But the one I'm looking forward to the most is actually a 5th edition D&D game that is based on the Dungeons & Dragons animated series from 1983 to 1984. You get to play the characters Sheila, Bobby, Eric, and the rest, Hank and the crew.
Please tell me there are still spots in this. I have to be in on this.
It's a lot of fun, and it's going to be
awesome.
Exciting. I can't wait to do it. I ran it here in Colorado, and it was a big hit. So,
greetings, adventurers!
Oh yeah, the whole table. I said every time Dungeon Master comes out, all the kids say in tandem Dungeon Master, and they all did. and like people 4 tables away are like, "What are they doing over there?"
But Dungeon Master.
Do you have all your cryptic phrases already worked out for the Dungeon Master?
Well, a lot of it's improv, but it's I do have some worked out. Okay, so what have I been playing lately? again, I'm going to be a little long here because Daryl and I took a hiatus and we're just coming back now. But I've been playing a lot of Savage Worlds recently, which should surprise no one. We've been playing Savage Worlds Shintar, which is, of course, Sean Patrick fan setting, high fantasy, and having a lot of fun with that. Been playing The Crew, which is modern day monster hunters who have special abilities and things like that. I play a character who is a demigod, basically the daughter of Nike and a human man, which is pretty fun. And I've been running my D&D 5th edition Birthright game, which is actually going so well. We've got huge amounts of blue booking now running back and forth between all the characters, and Jake Burgess, who's been on the show before, professional artist, has been drawing all kinds of crazy pictures for the campaign. It's just, it's exploding.
That's been going on for almost a year now, hasn't it? Like,
yeah.
8 months now, 9 months?
Something like that, yeah. But of course, the big news, there's a couple of big things that have come up recently for me. I've got the announcement that Savage Rifts is a thing. It's a big news.
Yeah.
And I'm actually the lead developer on that project, so I'm really excited about it.
Oh, cool.
And we've got a lot to do, but not a lot we can actually say. So I'll just leave it at that we're really busy.
I will say this. I have been hanging out in Twitch channels for other channels a lot when I'm doing editing, and every single time I say, oh, someone will mention Rifts randomly, like, oh, did you hear they're doing a Savage Worlds version of Rifts? And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, dude, the guy who hosts my podcast is designing it.
I'm actually not designing, I'm developing. Sean Fannin is the lead designer.
I make sure I mentioned Sean too. So,
okay.
Because I can't remember who's doing what in Division of Term. You're a project manager. He is lead designer.
Correct.
Okay.
And I've also got a project that's coming out soon for Savage Worlds. The Savage Worlds Lankamar set, which I got to design all the monsters and characters for that one, which was really fun.
Which remind me, someone from Pinnacle emailed me before the show, and I haven't had a chance to respond. Remind me to respond to them after the show, Ross.
After the show, don't forget to respond to Pinnacle.
No, I was reminding you after the show. After the show, Oxford comma, remind me to.
Okay.
When you're editing this, you'll come across it and you go, oh my God, I have to email those guys.
Right.
Oh my God, I should have emailed them 2 weeks ago.
And the last thing I want to mention is there's a video game I got to write called Warhammer 40,000 Regicide. And it has hit early release on Steam at the moment we're recording this, which is May 5th.
Sweet.
And you can find a whole bunch of awesome first look videos online from the company, Hammerfall Publishing. They name drop me quite a bit, which is really exciting. But I got to write all the dialogue for all the trailers, all the dialogue for all the adventure, the 50 different single player campaign missions, stuff like that. It was super fun to work on, and I'm just so excited it's finally out there. So yes, that kind of wraps me up with what I've been doing lately, which I know was a big, long, rambling thing from pretty much all of us. But that's great. Let's get into the next part of our show. And the next part of our show is the Tavern Tales. Tavern Tales is where we ask our guests, and in this case, that's going to be, of course, Will and Stan, to give us a quick story about a memorable die roll from a game that you've played. Ideally, maybe a Ravenloft game, if you can think of one. Okay, I'm going to make Will go first.
All right. Well, unfortunately, oh gosh, I don't think I've got one for Ravenloft. But actually, I'm going to go right back to that Arkham Horror with all the trimming games.
Okay.
So, without having to get, too much of an explanation of the rules, if you can't manage to achieve a victory condition within a certain amount of time, the god you're opposing actually awakens and you get one last ditch attempt to actually fight it, which in most cases is completely, impossible. So, everybody's kind of scrambling to figure out what's the best stuff they can have, what's gonna give people a real edge on the fight. Well, there's the very first player that was gonna go during the first round of this fight with the Elder God had, for some reason, had ended up with all of the disposable weapons, all the weapons you have to discard after you use them. And so just decided to go ahead and use them all. So it was like a Molotov cocktail and like fireworks or something. It was like a Molotov cocktail and dynamite. Like that's what this character was armed with. And just decided, what the heck? I'm gonna do it. And I think ended up rolling 10 dice for their attack, which is a ridiculous amount of dice to roll for an attack in Arkham Horror. Like a lot of miracles have to happen. And wouldn't you know it, right before the fight started, because of a rumor card that got resolved, everyone at the table got blessed, which ups your odds of success. So they roll these 10 dice. The very first roll of that combat is enough to weaken the Elder God. Every single die is a success.
Nice.
It's just everything that, for the first time in all the years I've been playing Arkham Horror,
The stars were right.
yeah,
Maybe
and
not.
everything that could go right went right. But of course, once it was the Elder God's turn to act, that was the first player to die. So it came back around.
Did you just say the player died?
Well, their character died.
I was going to say, that would be a very memorable game of Arkham Horror.
The player could have had a heart attack later that night just because of the accumulated stress of the board game. But yeah, their investigator was the very first to die.
Nice.
You're the coat that finds you wanting.
All right. That's a great story, Will. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now we've given Stan a moment to think about something.
Oh, goodness gracious. So I've decided to go, recently on our Monday night board games, we played a 3 or 4 week run of Formula Day. I don't know if you're familiar with Formula Day, the car racing game. And the first couple of weeks where everyone kind of get used to it, and then new people joined in. And then the last week, we decided to actually have a big race. And throughout the first few weeks, I just spent every race just in the middle of the pack. Nothing I could do ever worked out, and I was just somewhere in the middle the whole way. So we're in the actual race on the last week we're doing it, and everything's going right for me. Like, I'm out front, and no one can keep up with me. People are just kind of staying on my heel, and we're coming through, and we're getting about 2/3 of the way through the final lap. And we had a area where there was a 2-turn curve followed by a short straightaway and a 1-turn curve. And I'm sorry if you're not familiar with the game, that won't mean anything to you. But if you are, you're like, that's kind of a stressful way to go. And I'm coming in, and I decide not to push it too hard. I'm just going to do it right because I've got this lead. And, well, not actually remember the numbers because the dice are all weird. I rolled as low as I could on my approach, leaving me short of the first curve.
Oh.
Then as high as I could 3 times in a row.
Oh, Lord.
God.
And barely managed not to blow my car up, and got out of the final straightaway and rolled as low as I could the rest of the way out, and got passed by like 4 people.
Oh, no.
Right up in the middle of the pack again.
Wow. Now, I like the mashup that Knights at Dinner Table did with Car Wars, which was called Formula Die.
And I will say, if someone wants a Tavern tale that's specifically about Ravenloft, R.A. Salvatore's Wubba Wubba story takes place in Ravenloft. The Wand of Wonder story.
Yeah.
You guys know that one?
I've heard it.
I think we've talked on the show before about the one campaign that my friend Bryant Smith did, where we all were dwarves from different cosms.
Yep.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, we ruined his Ravenloft game pretty hard. But, okay. Speaking of Ravenloft, let's actually jump right into our main subject tonight. Let's ask, since Stan was actually involved in Ravenloft, Stan, why don't you start out by telling us what is the setting, the campaign setting of Ravenloft all about? Well,
so the funny thing is that's not an easy question to answer, because there have been at least 3 distinct stages of Ravenloft. But what carries over it all is the idea this is Ravenloft is a familiar name for what's known as the Demiplane of Dread. And it's a mysterious place that is ruled over by these powers that no one quite knows what they are, that create these mists that transport people who have done some horrible evil into this demiplane, where they are forced to often relive aspects of what they've done wrong, or just to survive against other creatures and beings who have been evil and been pulled into the demiplane. And they each will have their own domain, which is almost like a hell of their own creation. The powers, right. Ravenloft powers have created it, built off what they've done to torment them.
I always put the dark powers, in my mind anyway, as basically cats playing with a mouse, except for that's the entire plane is their mouse, mixed with Rod Sterling from the Twilight Zone.
Right. Yeah, I mean, depending on different people who've been involved in Ravenloft, some are of the opinion that the dark powers are evil and are tormenting people, and some are of the opinion that the dark powers are good, who are helping to correct evil in the universe, and some are the, dark powers are unknowable cats that just torment things because they can.
Now, you say there's 3 distinct stages of Ravenloft.
At least, because it came out as a originally just as an adventure. I mean, it's all kind of based off this adventure that Tracy and Laura Hickman wrote,
Yes.
Castle Ravenloft,
I6.
which was the idea of this domain where Strahd the vampire is trapped. It became a hook around the campaign setting where the larger picture of other domain lords and the mists and this land, the central area of connected almost island or small continent of related domains came in, and then as it went along, that got broken up even more, so that in that section there was a lot of ongoing storylines. The second edition run where there was the Great Conjunction storyline and several other, the Grim Harvest storyline, things that jumped around, and there was a through story, and it was developed very much like a campaign setting. And then as it got through into late second edition and into the third edition, as it was picked up and licensed out away from Wizards, it went back to being a little more separate and developed where things were a lot more tailored to the particular situation, and then you would be swallowed by the mists and wind up somewhere else.
Well, actually, there's actually another permutation of that then, because in 4th edition D&D, it became simply another part of what was called the Shadowfell.
Oh, yes. Oh, wow. I completely forgot about that.
You and a lot of people either forgot about it or really wish they could forget about that.
Well, this is something I was going to break in, because I had on the show notes the actual history of the publication of it, but basically Ravenloft was supposed to be the 4th big campaign setting for 4th edition. And it was due up on the development track around the time when everyone said, hey, things aren't going the way we wanted to. Let's shuffle everything up and do Essentials instead. So after they did Forgotten Realms, Dark Sun, and Eberron, Ravenloft was supposed to follow, and that got canceled, and the material they'd worked on at that point got rolled into Shadowfell, Gloomrot, and Beyond.
So it really is a shame for Ravenloft. On the other hand, for my money, the Shadowfell is one of my favorite things that came out of 4th edition.
Well, I have nothing against the Shadowfell in and of itself. But like you, I think it's kind of a shame that a setting as rich as Ravenloft became and also ran. That's the only thing about
it was
that.
Almost a footnote in the planes below.
Well, okay, so Stan's given us a really good overview of what the setting is all about. Maybe we should ask Will Thrasher and have him tell us, what does Ravenloft as a setting mean to him?
Well, I love horror movies. Particularly, I love the old Hammer horror movies, where they're just very atmospheric, very, very European. And whenever I think of Ravenloft, I'm thinking of a setting that lets you play every Hammer horror movie all at once.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it.
It's got some Dracula, it's got some Frankenstein, it's got some Curse of the Werewolf. It's a wonderful synthesis of all these different horror elements. And I love that the fact that it's a demiplane and it's a place made up of other places and people that got sucked in just helps to justify that mishmash. You don't have to write a 2,000 or 3,000 year long history to explain why they were both werewolves and vampires on this world. All you need to know is they just got sucked in through the mist.
Well, it is one of the few places in the settings besides Sigil where you could meet somebody from anywhere else in the D&D sort of pantheon of settings.
Yeah, that's actually something else I like. You don't, as GM running Ravenloft, I don't have to do any conceptual backflips to justify a character a player bringing in their favorite type of character from their favorite type of campaign. It's truly, anything goes. You can bring in any character from outside Ravenloft that exists in the D&D multiverse. Yeah. And it's just an established part of the setting that can happen.
What about you, Daryl? What does Ravenloft mean to you as a setting?
Oh God, I love Ravenloft so much. It's my favorite setting, hands down, of all the core settings, because it is. I didn't even realize why I loved it so much until I listened to everyone else talk. But it is literally take all the Hammer horror films, throw them in a blender, Take the Twilight Zone, throw that in a blender. Take the Universal horror movies, throw those in a blender, hit frappe, Ravenloft comes out. It is all
serve over ice.
It is all
Some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
8 of 10. The Fruit Loops were better. Sorry, that's a reference only Redditors will get, but no, it is all the gothic horror and dark fantasy themes and tropes put together in a setting that is specifically meant to, and it's one of the, this and Planescape both share one core thing that doesn't exist in any other version or any other campaign setting in D&D. The Dark Powers and the Lady of Pain are never statted out and never fully described. So it adds this air of mystery. It's what are the Dark Powers? I have my interpretation of them. Like I said, Rod Sterling is a cat playing with a plane full of mice.
Right.
That's my interpretation of the Dark Powers. Someone else's is going to be completely different and just as justified based on the canon material. And just the way you can play it as a campaign setting. You were born and raised in Barovia or Darkon or any of these other things. And Darkon, we'll get to that in a minute. You may not have been born and raised there, but you can be born and raised there, or you can be sucked in from Faerun. You can be sucked in from, I think there was a Dark Lord from Dark Sun even.
Yeah, there was.
One of the Sorcerer Kings.
There was Dark Lords from every published campaign setting that I'm aware of.
Except Eberron.
Well, okay, yes. Let's be very clear. We're talking about Ravenloft at its height. Yeah. And at its height would have been pre-3rd edition.
Well, yeah, there was even a Spelljammer crossover. And
yes.
It was to the point where it's like, okay, we've got this guy from Spelljammer here. Let's not talk about him because Spelljammer has space hamsters, and that's not really going to mesh well with the tone.
Listen, I will defend Spelljammer to the death, but nevertheless, that's a different show.
I'm saying clash of themes and styles there, not knocking Spelljammer.
Okay.
I like the space hippos.
Let's focus on Ravenloft here.
But yeah, the Dark Powers, the mist, you can pull anyone up.
All right, I'm going to jump in and talk about what it means to me as well. I liked Ravenloft a lot. I mean, obviously it was a big influence on me for when I created my Savage World setting called The Cursed. And I do, much like Will, love the fact that it's Hammer horror mixed with, that fantasy feel. I think, the thing I love the most about it, though, is actually how it changed the paradigm of play. And what I mean by that is like a typical D&D adventure is like you go into a ruin, you fight a bunch of monsters, you take some treasure out. There's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely awesome. And I have had a lot of fun doing that. But your typical Ravenloft adventure relied a lot more, at least in my experience, on the role-playing and the exploration and the investigation, because there was usually there was a question of who is the real monster? What is really going on? Who is the evil that we need to fight? You know what I mean? And I felt like those questions and those answers that played into the adventures, they really changed. They just made that experience of playing a game in Ravenloft a little bit less of just kick in the door and fight the monster in the dungeon, and a little bit more of the story and the character and getting to know what's happening on that front. So that's what I really liked about it for me.
And there was a lot of more lateral thinking in Ravenloft Adventures. I mean, you could do the normal murder hobo, kick in the door and start fighting everything thing. That's a good way to get a crap load of powers checks really fast in Ravenloft. So
well, again, there's places in Ravenloft where that is absolutely the right thing to do, and you're a hero because you do it.
But not in all of them, and it's usually you have to think about, okay, should we kick in the door or should we think about this for a minute? And
well, I'm just thinking that most of the adventures I saw that I liked a lot for Ravenloft involved a lot of role playing and mystery and investigation. I guess that's just really where I'm coming from. Is that those things were celebrated a little more.
Well, even, going back to the original Ravenloft module that all this spun out of, one of the reasons that's one of my favorite, if not my outright favorite, old school D&D module, is that so much of it is just solving the mystery of who is Strahd. Why is there this cursed vampire here? Yes. And I love that the campaign assumes that you will at some point figure that out.
Yeah, did you find the Sun Sword?
Unfortunately, I did not. No.
I found the Sun Sword when I played through Ravenloft, and I was like, "This is awesome!" Because you can't think of anything better to fight a vampire with than a Sun Sword.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And one of the interesting things about D&D is that people just kind of talk in general. They say D&D is all about, as you're saying, kicking in the door, killing what's there, and taking its treasure. But it doesn't have to be. And Ravenloft, it kind of is that writ large, right? It's proof. You don't have to have a campaign that plays that way, and you can still play D&D. And, that there are sections where you do that is the icing on the cake. But Ravenloft very much is a story-oriented setting. It like most horror, it's not about the conflict. It's about what you do before the conflict really matters.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what it means. Daryl, why don't you clue us in a little bit more on these dark powers and how they work in the setting?
They are my favorite thing ever in any campaign setting. It is basically Rule Zero and DM Fiat and railroading all boiled down into actual rules in the game. The dark powers are these mysterious things that basically control everything in Ravenloft. They're the ones who decide who gets sucked up from other campaign settings, who becomes a Dark Lord versus who becomes just someone who's there. They're the ones who decide what gets through and what doesn't in terms of if you're trying to cast a summoning spell or if you're a divine spellcaster, what spells you even have access to. Because you don't have context with the gods per se in Ravenloft. You're getting your spells still, but you don't know who's giving it to you, and it might even be the dark powers themselves. And it's just, those times when your player says, I'm going to cast a wish spell, and they read off what they're going to cast, and you're looking at them, it's like, oh, I can screw you over 18 ways from Sunday. Ravenloft encourages you to do that. Because that's just how the dark powers work. It's about this mysterious force that has its own agenda, or it has no agenda. It may just want to watch the world burn. We don't know. We just know they love ironic punishments more than anything else on the planet.
I think the dark powers were cool. They were definitely flavorful. But I think also it was, one of those strengths that's also a weakness. Just in the way that it came out in play. I observed numerous GMs who did it right and numerous GMs who did not.
Yeah.
And the dark powers is kind of a license to, in many ways, be a jerk, be an adversarial jerk even, to your players. And I think, I believe that actually put a bit of a stigma on the setting.
I think that, it also, very much is a prime example of the bonus of role playing, where it's all up to the GM, which is also the negative of if your GM isn't very good, well that affects the game for everyone. It's kind of it's not, the dark powers are a personification of the problem that many of the indie game designers, the people who would become the indie game designers in the 90s and early 2000s, saw with role playing as it existed. Right, that you have this one fiat that's sitting there, and if your GM does one thing and the players don't like it, you're just kind of stuck. And on the other hand, when the GM does it great, no one complains because everyone's having a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. Will Thrasher, tell us about the mists of Ravenloft.
The mists. I mean, it's just like the perfect horror movie setup. Your characters are out in whatever campaign setting they're in, doing whatever they're doing, hunting for the dungeon, hunting down a drake, what have you, and just this creepy, chill mist rolls in. And by the time you notice that there's anything supernatural about the mist, it's too late. And by the time that mist clears, you're going to find yourself somewhere in Ravenloft. And and I've talked about this a lot. There's this great quote from Sid and Marty Krofft where they said that they took a lot of heat for always doing fish out of water stories, but that they firmly believe that the fish out of water story is the only real story. And I actually agree with that in a lot of ways. And Ravenloft is a perfect example. It's a setting that just screams to be a fish out of water story, because the mist let give you the perfect campaign setup to take any heroic characters or even any villainous characters out of their comfort zone and putting them in this dark world where, whether they're good or evil, the deck is stacked against them in all these weird, mysterious ways.
And the mists, of course, they actually form the borders between each domain in Ravenloft. And they can be passed through normally most of the time. But other times they can become actually completely impenetrable, or may even take you somewhere completely different than where you were headed in the first place.
Dark powers, shrug.
And the worst, possibly the worst element to the mists is that they actually block off contact with any gods of any of the other planes.
Welcome to the Demiplane of Dread.
You remember that part, Will? You remember that commune doesn't work, and
Yep. That's one of those cool ways where the deck is stacked against you. You can't use your magic to reach for a light in the darkness, and I really love that. I mean, that's where the dread comes from. That there are higher powers, but the ones you want to contact, you're not going to be able to reach from Ravenloft.
I still remember the rule that if you cast any sort of summon spell in Ravenloft, you will probably get the creature. It's now stuck in Ravenloft 2, and it's probably, once your control is done, pissed off that it's on the Demiplane of Dread.
Well, you remember they had some of the best monsters compendiums came from Ravenloft. And I still remember all the awesome Ravenloft versions of elementals. Like, you summon an earth elemental, you get a grave elemental. you summon a water elemental, you got a blood elemental instead. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was fun stuff.
Actually, on the subject of the mists, passing through the mists, and sometimes it'll send you to a different part of Ravenloft than the one you wanted to go to. I once had a group of players, and this is of course based on something that a GM did in the past, where he would repeatedly, whenever they had to cross through the mist, would use it to split up the party in very detrimental ways, like in ways that were kind of destructive to the campaign. So this one player who'd been subject to that multiple times in the campaign was so paranoid that he whenever any other GM, the characters were to pass through the mists, he insisted that they all wrap a 30-foot rope around one 30-foot rope, wrap it around their wrists so that they can't be split up.
Nice.
Well, the other thing is the mists may send you where you want to go, but they may not send you when you want to go.
Oh yes.
Well, the time travel thing I think was pretty played down. It was a possibility, but it was fairly rare. I mean, let's be very clear about that.
I think there's only 3 times that time travel came into play.
Well, speaking of reaching for higher powers, because I think that was something that Will was talking about earlier. Divine magic worked differently a little bit, and I think you've already gone over a little bit of that, Daryl.
Yep.
But I think the fun part is actually if you're a paladin.
Sorry, that's my inner DM cackling.
Do you want to tell us about paladins in Ravenloft?
Paladins are the searchlight in the fog coast, the lighthouse, the beacon. If you are a paladin and you are on a Demiplane of Dread, whatever domain you're on, the Dark Lord of that domain knows exactly when you show up on that plane, how strong you are, your character level, and where you are at all times.
Well, that could be both good and bad. I mean, I can imagine you trying to sleep and you're like, I still know where that paladin is.
A paladin on a Demiplane of Dread warps reality around it because it is lawful good in a domain that is basically at best lawful neutral to chaotic evil based on the residents there. It's look out for yourselves. Even the farmland is like, keep your head down, don't notice anything. So even your basic commoners are not getting involved in anything. So a paladin shining a light of justice and might and good is just, you might as well just be pointing an arrow to yourself on Google Maps saying, I am here to thwart your plans. I am here to thwart your plans.
All right. Now, something that's very specific to the setting of Ravenloft is a group called the Vistani. Now, I would like, Stan, if you wouldn't mind, to tell us, or tell the listeners, who are the Vistani?
Oh, goodness. I don't know.
Okay.
There was a lot of argument about the Vistani. When I came on the line, the Vistani were just kind of a Roma-like. They were almost as mysterious as the Dark Powers, and even more so because nothing had really been written about them yet. And so different people. Well, Bill Connors, who was the lead designer at the time I came on as an editor, had one very strong set of opinions about them. And David Wise, who had been the lead editor and was now in charge of creative services, had another very distinct take on them. And so the push was not to Defiant because no one could win that fight.
Wow.
So,
That's
but
interesting.
after I left, and Cindy Rice and Miranda Horner and David Wise again were leading development, I think they went on to do a lot to kind of give the Vistani more clear lines of distinction. But I say I was off the line at that point, and I decided I did not want to know, so no one could corner me at a bar and yell at me about the Vistani.
Okay, well, I'm sorry we brought it up there.
But I found them fascinating, but I also know that I very purposely stopped learning about them after a while because
All right.
that way I couldn't get dragged into, forget about the bar, I couldn't get dragged into a conference room for a 3-hour meeting about the Vistani.
All right, Will Thrasher, why don't you jump in and save us here? Who are the Vistani?
Well, it's kind of like you said. They're a Roma-like people. I mean,
They're gypsies, basically.
Yeah, they're like, they fit this sort of dark romantic notion of gypsies. They're these wanderers with caravans who are always moving around the Demiplane of Dread. They never have long-term contacts with any of the settlements that they pass through or around. So, all the usual, stereotypes that might get, directed at gypsies would be directed at them by the people of Ravenloft. No one knows, at least, back in like the second edition days, nobody knew whether they were just their own people or whether they were spies for the domain lords or a product of the dark powers.
Or enemies of the dark powers or friends.
Oh yeah.
You just didn't
and they
know.
fit that dark, romantic, horrific mold. Although at the same time, and actually I think I talked about this on a D Infinity episode where we talked non-human playable races, is that they are also, while they are, this expression of like, these dark horror movie and horror story sort of gypsy tropes, they're also a dumping ground for all these stereotypes that have been thrown at the actual Roma people. So it kind of is a mixed bag depending on, what your players are comfortable with, what you want to express about them in the game.
Right. So just to be very, very clear, it's a fictional race that is loosely based on stereotypes of gypsies.
Yes.
It's based on the tropes surrounding them, not the actual people.
Yes, correct. The tropes and themes.
We talked about
fortune telling.
Yeah, we talked about this one a little bit back when we were talking about the World
like
of Darkness gypsy.
Curses.
So,
like they have to move around. I think there's some kind of curse on them that they have to move.
They cannot stay if they stay in one place within 1 mile of that place for more than a week, they start getting flu-like symptoms until they move more than 1 mile out of there, and then they start to recover from it.
Right. So they're constantly on the move. Fortune telling, curses. They have some kind of weird ability to influence the mists.
They're about the only people in Ravenloft who, when they walk into the mists, actually come out more or less when and where they want to.
So they're a resource as well, I think, from a world building standpoint, for player characters to kind of learn more about where they are, where they might be going, or even, things that are happening in other realms. Which, if you look at it from that point of view, from the idea that it's a resource, I think the Vistani work pretty good as far as that, and in addition to kind of building up those, as Will pointed out, the hammer horror tropes of the setting.
Have you been looking for a dark fantasy RPG setting? Are you interested in seeing a new take on the action horror genre? Then you should check out Accursed. Accursed is a setting for the Savage Worlds RPG created by me, Ross Watson, and my good friends Jason Marker and John Dunn. It is a world where the heroes are monsters who fight for redemption against the witches who have conquered their land. To find out more about Accursed, search for Accursed on DriveThruRPG.com. Accursed is now on sale there and in many other fine retailers for gaming PDFs. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy Accursed.
Welcome back to episode 50 of Gamers Tavern Podcast. I'm Ross Watson, and we've got Daryl Lott Jr., of course, with Stan and Will Thrasher, and we're talking about the Ravenloft campaign setting. We just kind of finished talking about some of the basics of the campaign setting, and I think, would be interesting to talk a little bit about that production schedule. Sorry, not the production schedule, the production history, if you will, of Ravenloft a little more in depth.
Yeah, I'm going to brush over this really quickly, but it started off in 1983 when Tracy and Laura Hickman created module number I6. The I stood for intermediate, which that was back in the, I think it was first edition days. It was 1983 when they published that. And it was kind of iconic because it was the first one that, first module they made that you could keep replaying, because where the items, there were 5 cards you drew, and 4 of them represented where specific magic items were and where Strahd was in Castle Ravenloft. And the 5th one represented what his motivation was. Whether he was trying to get one of the objects or whether he was trying to, kidnap this woman who, when you found the diary, which was another one of the items, described Strahd's backstory, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. And the fact that it randomized things means you could replay the dungeon. Unlike any other dungeon up until this time, you could replay it and have completely different outcomes every time. And I-10, which is House on Griffin Hill in 1986, the sequel to that, also played on those same tropes. It was written from an outline from Tracy Hickman, but 6 different designers worked on that one. I don't have their names in the show notes.
Well, let's just say it's not as memorable as Ravenloft.
Yeah, it's still iconic, but it's not quite as iconic as the very first one of that. But it was iconic enough that in 1990, it was the Realm of Terror box set, which I am glad to have on my gaming shelf,
now,
even though
it's really important to note here that the Realm of Terror is actually based on I6, not I10.
Yes. Well, I-10 is incorporated into it was retconned into Ravenloft, in that the House on Griffin Hill takes place in one of the Realms of Terror, and it ends up with, Aslan and Strahd trying to escape Ravenloft in a plot and blah, blah. Anyway.
You know, what's really interesting to me about that date, 1990, okay? Mm-hmm. You got this big black box set, Realm of Terror. It's all about Ravenloft. And as we mentioned, it's got that different paradigm, right? It's got that slightly more character focus, slightly more investigation focus. Well, guess what happens 1 year later, right? 1991, Vampire the Masquerade comes out. You know, and I always thought that was interesting. I thought that, you know, these 2 products came out so close to each other and had a lot of overlap. And obviously, I think we all agree, you know, that Vampire the Masquerade was one of the biggest things to happen in the 1990s in the role-playing game market. It just absolutely, you know, came to almost define that decade. So I find it really interesting to note that this, you know, predates that by maybe even a little less than a year.
Yeah, and the Ravenloft was also the first D&D official campaign setting. And it really depends on how deeply you look at the publication history, whether it or Dark Sun was the first non-traditional, like non-Tolkien-esque fantasy setting to get made into a campaign setting. It depends on, again, they both went into development about the same time. I think Dark Sun came out about 6 months before Realm of Terror did. But both of these were 2 campaign settings that weren't basically, you're playing in Middle-earth for the most part. And it also was one of the first, it was the second after Dragonlance to get a major novel line behind it. And it actually had some names that became huge in the urban fantasy industry. Laurel K. Hamilton and P.N. Elrod both got their start in fiction. Well, I don't know if they got their start per se, but some of their early works were writing novels for the Ravenloft line.
Well, don't forget noted author Tanya Huff wrote a book.
Tanya Huff is another one. She is another
and friend of the show and former guest Ari Marmel.
Ari Marmel never wrote an official novel that got published. Like I said,
he wrote for the line.
He wrote for the line, and by the way, I'm so excited. I finally found the link to the novel, the lost Ravenloft novel he actually finished.
Yeah, because he mentioned that when he was on the show with us.
And I could not find it back then, but I found it now, and it's going to be in the show notes. It's called Black Crusade. It was the last officially released Ravenloft product ever. Unfortunately.
Well, so far,
at least until 5th edition Ravenloft comes around, which Wizards of the Coast, we want Ravenloft. Okay.
Well, let's get back to it. It, of course, you know, kind of died right before 3rd edition came out, but it got picked up. Well, it got picked up by White Wolf, who got the license.
Well, there was a thing. The last things that TSR did with it was TSR and Wizards of the Coast. It was right about the time of the buyout, which was Die Vecna Die, and Vecna Reborn and Die Vecna Die were these two adventures where Vecna gets his own Demiplane of Dread, and then breaks out of it. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the show, maybe if we get time for it. But basically, Vecna breaks both Ravenloft and Planescape. But that was pretty much the last things that were done officially. Then it was licensed over to Art House Games, which was a publishing subsidiary of White Wolf, who published the games through Sword and Sorcery, who did the what was Sword and Sorcery? The first thing they
did? The Shattered, what is it called? Now you got me doing it. But
Shattered Skies?
No. It was something Shattered, though. Now I can't remember what it is.
Crap, I'm looking for the book on my shelf.
Shattered Kingdoms.
Yes. That is famous for two things. One, being an awesome setting that a lot of people ignored, and two, its monster manual actually beat out the 3rd edition monster manual to print by a month. So, but
there's a lot of good stories there.
Sure. But one of the main things that happened in the 3rd and 3.5 edition days of Ravenloft was that it was
the Scarred Lands. Scarred
Lands. That's it.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things was they really drew on the fan community to basically step up and design this game. They went to Usenet, BBSs, and websites, because those were Usenet and BBSs were a thing back then. The websites were all like Angel what's it, and GeoCities page, Angel Fire and GeoCities pages.
Oh,
but
yeah.
These people that were writing netbooks, which when that was a thing, was supplements for Ravenloft, and they said, "Oh, hey, you guys are doing good jobs. Do you guys want to actually work on the game?" And then that happened until about 2005, when the license was not renewed, and Wizards of the Coast took it back. The last thing that was going to be published was Van Richten's Guide to the Mists, which that was only able to be released as a PDF download. Then we've got nothing else coming out except for
I think we can skip the rest pretty much.
Expedition to Ravenloft in 2006 didn't actually take place in Ravenloft.
Yeah, when we're talking about it
Greyhawk
tonight,
thing.
and I think everyone here is going to agree with me, we're talking about it primarily through that lens of that box set Realm of Terror and the stuff that came out around that period.
And I already talked about the 4th edition woes. I'm sorry, it's just in the notes. It's like 4th edition was going to be the next campaign setting, and
yeah, we talked about that one.
Oh,
well,
let's threw such a hissy fit on Twitter when that happened.
Let's get into the interesting part about Ravenloft as a setting, from a world building perspective. Let's talk about the domains and the Dark Lords, because very few settings aside from Ravenloft really have such memorable an interesting cast of characters, especially as villains, with the Dark Lords and the realms that they rule.
Well, that's one thing we haven't actually explained completely, I don't think, on this episode.
Well, let's start with Stan, because he worked on it. So, yeah, Stan, tell us a little bit about, first of all, what is a Dark Lord, and what is one of the Dark Lords you want to tell us about?
Well, Dark Lords are all creatures of horrible evil, either adventurers or villains from lands outside the mist who've done terrible, terrible evil and drawn the attention of the dark powers, who've pulled them into Ravenloft and given them a domain. Now, Dark Lord is tied to a particular chunk of land, which often reflects something about his past and the evil he has done. He is both in control of it, in that he controls the borders and the reality of what goes on around it, and he is subject to it, in that the dark powers can change the rules anytime they like.
And he's trapped there, too.
And he's trapped there. He cannot leave. He cannot move beyond the borders. Some are more clearly in charge, and some are more tormented by what's going on. It's all, as I say, each one is crafted very much to suit that particular creature and his evils and wants.
So pick a Dark Lord that's one of your favorites and tell us about it.
I did not study, teacher.
All right, well, let's ask Will Thrasher. What's one of your favorite Dark Lords?
Well, there's one whose name I can't remember, but it was like an evil puppet.
Oh.
this like evil like jester puppet who just played
Yeah.
twisted games with people. I wish I could remember his name because that just reminds me of Unico and the Magic Island, which is just one of my favorite
Jigsaw.
nightmare
It is not
movies.
Jigsaw. I was reading this today. No, it's not Jigsaw.
But I guess like the one that I would like to just mention by name would be Bluet Spur, the God Brain. I'm a huge fan of illithids. And I love that there's a supreme illithid intelligence in Ravenloft, and it's just this massive gestalt brain made up of the brains of all these different illithids it's absorbed. And it likes to think that it has perfect knowledge, but its knowledge is very, very flawed. And it's starting to realize that it kind of wishes it had legs and a body and wasn't just a brain that all it can do is think all day.
Nice.
Well,
Well,
it's kind of like half illithid, half lich or something in a way, but not quite.
Think
But
at one point, I think it may have like attained some kind of undead status. I know a lot of like domain lords were kind of like, you know, in flux depending on which edition of Ravenloft you're looking at.
I'm going to tell you about my favorite. My favorite is actually from a Dungeon Magazine adventure, which eventually became, I believe, official in the later publication of what was it called? Realms? The Realms of Dread?
Realms of Terror. I thought.
Something like that, yeah, Realms of Terror. And it was called Ebonbane. Now, Ebonbane is actually a magic sword. It was once a paladin's holy sword, but it has now become this like horrible animated intelligent weapon, and it controls the manor house of its former owner, Lady Kateri Shadowborn. And so the adventure dealing with Ebonbane is all about this haunted house that every part of the house is controlled by the sword. and you have to kind of decipher the history of how this sword became corrupt in order to destroy it and escape the haunted house. It's absolutely wonderful. It was written by Bill Connors, this adventure, Bane of the Shadowborn. And it was for me, it was one of the perfect introductions to the setting and a really interesting and unusual Dark Lord. Daryl, what's one of your favorite Dark Lords?
I've got to go with the original Count Strahd von Zarovich.
Strahd.
Yep. He is one of the most beloved characters of Ravenloft, if you want to call him beloved, because
he is
still
the
an
original
evil, literally blood-sucking bastard.
He was the original villain from the i6 1983 Ravenloft.
Yep, and I love that. The reason why I love him so much is that a lot of the other curses have something that's game mechanics related. Like you've got Aslan, who that is the Dark Lord of Darkon, which you might remember that from the live-action role-playing game movie Darkon, where they actually play in that realm. But his thing is he's a lich who can't learn new spells.
Wait, are you saying the live-action role-play Darkon is actually supposed to be set in the Ravenloft realm of Darkon?
If I'm not mistaken, yes.
I never knew that.
I may be completely wrong on that. So please comment in the show notes of the forums and let us know.
I would find that very surprising if that was in fact supposed to be.
I think if that's true, then TSR never knew it.
Maybe they know now. Secret's out.
But
oh god.
But his was you can't learn new spells. There's other ones. It's like what is it? The werewolf that if he becomes too bestial becomes human. And he's like the werewolf god of a new religion. But Count Strahd's curse is he is in love with this woman, Tatiana. And he actually murdered his own brother to claim Tatiana and his brother Sergei were supposed to get married. And he murdered Sergei in order to claim Tatiana as his own, and found out that the deal he made in order to get the power to kill Sergei turned him into a vampire. And she kills herself when she finds out that her love is gone. And Tatiana keeps getting reincarnated in Barovia. And every single time she gets reincarnated, Strahd has a new way to earn her love.
And save her.
And it turns to ash in his mouth every time. And it's just such a perfect story. There's no game mechanics involved. There's nothing like, okay, well, he only has this list of spells. It's not a weakness that your characters can exploit by using some sort of mechanical advantage. It is pure role play. Once this woman, and he is in love with this woman. And no matter how many times she is dangled in front of him, he cannot learn that he is never going to have her because the dark powers take her from him. I think canon 4 times she's been reincarnated.
Well, it's really the point we're making here is that I think Ravenloft is such a rich setting, partially because it has these really great characters. The realms themselves are not so much as interesting as the Dark Lords and what's happening with the Dark Lords and why, what is the way that your characters can interact with them.
And you compare it to Twilight Zone, right? All of the Dark Lords are characters with very strong and exploitable failings, and their hell is of their own making. And if they could recognize their problems and overcome them, they might improve as human beings or lithids or whatever creature they are. But instead, Strahd is a great example, right? Tatiana keeps coming back, and all he really has to do is actually win her back to him, and everything would be fine. But he doesn't. He
schemes
tries
and plots and plans
to steal her, or to spirit her away, or to assume control of her. And so, because of his own weakness, he loses again.
His hubris.
Yes.
I think you can't talk about Dark Lords though without mentioning possibly the most famous of them all, which would be Lord Soth, the Death Knight from the Dragonlance setting.
Oh dear.
Now, this is, the really interesting thing about this is actually this is the kind of it started that meta plot, meta story kind of element, because Lord Soth was really a character from the novels before he was really a character in the games. And he became such a really important and beloved character from the novels that when they decided to move him to Ravenloft, it was a thing. I remember at the time when this happened, I remember everyone was talking about it. It was like, wow, did you hear Lord Soth is now in Ravenloft? Oh my gosh. It was a fairly big event.
There's a lot. Yeah, we could talk for another hour about this.
We tried to get Tracy Hickman on the show for this, but his schedule didn't work out, and we did not mention Lord Soth once when I was talking to him. So that's not the reason why he didn't come on. So I want to make that clear.
Well, Stan, why don't you help us out here? What's the backstory here?
Well, so I mean, oddly enough, both Soth and Strahd, can't say that very easily, are both characters created by Tracy. But Soth was definitely a Dragonlance thing, and it was after Margaret and Tracy no longer were working for the company and had gone off to write Dragonlance and other things as freelance writers, that the company decided that they were going to pull characters in for Ravenloft to try and strengthen its appeal, to give it an appeal to more people, a reason to come and try out Ravenloft. And Soth was a very, very popular character, and so they decided to pull him in. Margaret and Tracy were never down with that, and they also were very public about their thoughts on what TSR was doing at the time. And so there became a very big hubbub with fans who sided with Margaret and Tracy and fans who sided with TSR, and people who just didn't know and liked a good story, or people who just didn't know and thought, why don't you create your own characters? Stop going and cherry picking things off other existing properties. So there was no clear right or wrong, but there were a lot of arguments, and they went on and on for years. It's a sticking point with any negotiations between TSR and Tracy in particular, but Margaret and Tracy worked as a team at that point. So it was just one of those things that remained a sticking point that came up over and over again. In the meanwhile, I think Jim Lauder was a novelist who did a lot of stuff with Strahd and wrote some of the best Ravenloft books, and gave a great second story to this character. In the end, as a way to resolve the situation after Wizards had bought TSR, it was decided that they would close out Strahd in Ravenloft and make it in such a way that he reappeared in Krynn, having been gone in Krynnish time Not even an instant. So did it all happen or did it not happen? It's up to you to decide.
But what was the best, well, not the best, but maybe the most memorable part of what you just talked about there is the fact that he did escape Ravenloft. Now, Will Thrasher, what was your thoughts when you found this out, that Soth had managed to get out?
Well, actually, I have to admit, this is the first I've actually heard of it.
Oh, wow.
as much as, because I guess this is kind of, my dirty little secret, my knowledge of D&D and all of its different forms is kind of cherry picked because I've always been a much bigger fan of sci-fi than fantasy. So there's only a handful of sort of isolated D&D things that I've really sunk my teeth into. One of them being Ravenloft because of the horror elements, another being Spelljammer because of the bizarre spaceship elements, things like that. So this is actually all completely new to me. I had no idea they had actually let anybody escape from Ravenloft.
Well, Lord Soth, only 2 people have ever made it, and Soth was kind of the one that really shook everybody up. It was the guy who escaped the Impossible Prison, and I think, especially in my circle of guys who were fans of the setting, we thought this was amazing because if anybody deserved to get out and had the strength, the moral fortitude, the cunning, it would be Soth.
Soth was, of the 2 people, he's the one who did it honestly, in my opinion. He actually subverted the dark powers in their goal of basically mouse with a rat, blah, blah, blah. He actually took onto himself. It's like, yes, I have done wrongs. I deserve any torture you give to me. And the dark powers tried for decades, if not centuries, to draw him out and say, hey, here's this thing that you want, la la la. You're not going for this at all. You're just gonna sit and mope and be emo. Okay. And I honestly think the dark powers just like, oh, fuck it. Get the fuck out of here. And threw him back to Kryn, where it's like, you're not fun anymore.
Well, he didn't just sit around and do nothing, right?
Oh, no.
He did a lot of things while he was in Ravenloft. In fact, it was a pretty major conflict between him and Strahd.
Yeah, it was
shook this realm to its foundations.
TV Tropes described it as, quote, Ravenloft starts to resemble Tokyo with Lord Zoth playing the role of Godzilla.
Yeah, I think, and one of the things that always got me about the conflict between internally between the Ravenloft camp and the Dragonlance camp is that while I totally understand the fact that the Dragonlance is a storyline based setting and Soth was a character that had been created for a purpose that had never fully been fulfilled, and not wanting to see the character taken off to do second duty somewhere else. Even given that, I think that the blinder of that notion kept a lot of the Dragonlance fans from taking a look at and seeing what a great job the Ravenloft people, and I could say James Lowder in particular, did in being true to the character and really writing a great storyline.
I will back you up on that entirely, Stan. I read the novels that James wrote about Strahd and Soth and the Knight of the Black Rose, I believe is the name of the book. Yeah. They're excellent. I agree with you. He did a really good job of taking that character and making him really come alive. Yeah,
the fight line is, well, they're just taking our character and doing whatever they want with it. But in point of fact, I think that Lowder did a fantastic job of developing the character and doing something which is true to the character. The only problem was that it wasn't what Tracy wanted to do, and it didn't fit with his plans for what would happen later on with Dragonlance. And in the end, you can't have both. You know, sometimes you just can't put the chocolate in the peanut butter.
Well, I don't know. I think the fact that Soth was involved in Ravenloft actually enriched that setting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it enriched Kryn as well. I feel like it was actually, a thing that improved both. So there, probably more to the Ravenloft side, certainly, but it was just an interesting. I don't think you can have a meaningful discussion about Ravenloft without bringing up Lord Soth.
Yes. And in fact, when you asked me who my favorite Dark Lord was, I'll be honest, I was sitting here thinking Soth and thinking, I am not opening that can of worms.
You let me do that. So
Right. Oh, yes. And thank you very much.
Okay. Well, we could probably go on for an awful long time talking about all the really cool Dark Lords and all the really cool setting bits. And there are an awful lot of them. But I think, let's actually jump into the next section here and talk about, using Ravenloft as a campaign setting. How do you, and this would be a great subject actually for you, Stan. How do you run a Ravenloft game?
So, like I was saying before, there are a couple of different iterations of Ravenloft and a couple of different ways to use it. And for me personally, I never found the running Ravenloft game to be as interesting as the intermittent Ravenloft game. So the mists come in and pull you in. You have to deal with something, and you plant this. You've got to deal with the
weekend in hell.
Yes, you pick a Dark Lord in a setting that has thematic ties to what is going right and wrong for your characters, and you give them a chance to see the very real demarcation between good and evil. Because while D&D has alignments, and there are sometimes problems if you go against your alignment, it's nothing like going against your alignment in Ravenloft. Right? It's nothing like doing something evil in Ravenloft that's going to follow you forever.
Right, dark powers can actually change you.
So when I've always thought about using it, it's been as part of a longer campaign that involves areas outside of Ravenloft, where the characters are actually brought in as pawns of the dark powers that they don't even know because they're good.
So it's a nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah, I just find it. I find it very. The story it's telling. If I was going to run a full-in Ravenloft campaign, it would have to be with an idea of wrapping it up with the players having hope. Right? The problem for me with Ravenloft is that there's no hope. And that's just not heroic. When I'm running D&D, I generally like to do things that are heroic in scope. And Ravenloft is terrific as horror, but horror and heroism don't always go together.
And that's why you like it as the object lesson as opposed to...
Yeah, I like throwing horror at them from time to time.
But you don't like it as a trap that they're placed somewhere where they can't have any meaningful impact.
Well, or I would have to have some kind of fantasy. My idea for the campaign is fantasy horror, but that's just not the thing that comes to me very often. And this probably is one reason why I was better off suited after doing some work on Ravenloft to moving on to some other settings, because horror is something I like in small, very intense doses, but using it as an ongoing thing just kind of wears on me.
Well, if I may, I'd like to point you towards my campaign setting called Accursed, which is basically Hellboy meets Solomon Kane.
That's a good one line. That's a good sell line.
Thank you. Yeah, we worked on that pretty hard.
2-time winner of Gamers Tavern Awards.
I had nothing to do with that. All right.
We had to force that on him.
That's true. Okay, Will Thrasher, tell us about running a Ravenloft game.
One of the things that as a GM really attracts me to Ravenloft is that it's a setting that can enable, I think, like a richer form of heroism. Because as I said, in so many ways, the deck is stacked against you. And as a result, that makes whatever good you can do, whatever heroics you can do in that world, so much more important, because there's not necessarily going to be a reward, and everything in this world is trying to prevent you from doing that heroic act. And so, I'm always less interested in fantasy stories when some higher power gives people instructions to go on a quest, they become great heroes and get celebrated. The way I look at Ravenloft is that it's almost like you're in the French Resistance. If you're going to be a hero in Ravenloft, you're in the margins and you're trying to stay out of sight of every higher power the setting has, and you're trying to eke out whatever good you can. In Ravenloft, you can do a thrilling adventure that ends with the characters giving fresh bread to a starving family, because that's how that's the kind of dire strait that can exist in this world
Oh, there
run
we go.
by monsters and the in-lore.
From my ass, what you've described, actually, it came to me, and that is perfect. It's tragedy. It's high tragedy. You can be heroic, but you can't reap the rewards.
And actually, and on the subject of tragedy, whenever I run any kind of campaign, I like to have sort of an ending in mind. And whenever I'm framing something for Ravenloft, I always have two endings in mind, and it could go either way, all the way up to the end, which is either you find a way to get out of Ravenloft, maybe even taking some people with you, or you end up becoming the new domain lords.
And that can be fun. If with the right group, with the right players, that can be excellent.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I had players, the last time I played a Ravenloft game, I pulled them in the Ravenloft to try to teach them a lesson. We were talking about the mists and how mystical they are. They were in the middle of the Underdark, and suddenly it got foggy, and then they were in the middle of woods with the moon overhead. And they didn't figure it out until I spelled it out for them. Hey, I'm getting sick of your shit. You're in Ravenloft now. Oh, hey, we just killed this guy. And I started off with, actually, from the second edition version, there was a short story where a woman, she slowly unrobes. She takes off her robe. She takes off her small clothes. And then she takes off her head and sets it on the rock before she jumps in to get a swim. And it's supposed to be creepy and unsettling. And then the monk goes, I'm going to take her head. I'm like, fuck.
Yeah,
You
we
guys aren't
went
gonna
over this
learn
in a previous
crap.
episode, actually. We talked about the story in depth.
And the whole time, so I'm just facepalm, like, you guys aren't going to learn crap from this. And it got to the point where it's like, okay, seriously, I can get you guys out of Ravenloft and back to Greyhawk, or you guys are going to own your own domains of dread, you monsters. One guy was sitting there still skinning people in Ravenloft for a spell component.
Well, for me, I think the thing I like about Ravenloft as a game, that I would want to run is I like, and I brought this up when I talked about Ebonbane, as the Dark Lord. I think it's fun to take some of those heroic, to take some of those horror tropes and themes and then blend them in with some of the specific things that make D&D what it is. Intelligent weapons is a D&D thing. A holy Avenger sword is a D&D thing. And to take that and weave it into the idea of a haunted house, I think is beautiful. And that's how I would want to use Ravenloft. And I do really like actually where Stan's coming from and saying, let's visit it rather than let's make, set a whole campaign there. And it works really well for that, in my opinion, as a place to stop off and as, we've talked about, teach a lesson or, offer a different perspective on something that's happening in the main campaign setting. I really like that as well. It's hard for me to look at it, though, Ravenloft. It's hard for me to look at Ravenloft and say, this is a setting I would want to set a long campaign in.
Yeah. It's, the other thing is we talked a lot about that, the core of those connected domains. But for me, if Ravenloft, I mostly think of it as the islands, the island domains, where you're going from one and you just kind of, it's almost like episodic television. It's almost like Quantum Leap. Right? You're showing up somewhere, you don't know exactly what it is, but you got to figure out the problem and solve it so you can jump back into the mists, and hopefully they'll take you home this time.
Sam, Ziggy says this guy's a vampire.
That's right, yeah. 88% chance he's a vampire.
Which I believe was an episode of Quantum Leap.
No, but I could see a game like that too, almost like a supernatural roadshow, road trip type campaign where you're going from place to place, maybe trying to track down somebody who's fleeing from you. That would be, that might make a really fun way to do it. Use the Ravenloft setting as the backdrop for the main story, which is you chasing someone down. That could be really fun.
And I could totally see like an evil sorcerer in an act of desperation fleeing into Ravenloft to try to get away from the heroes.
Yeah. Now we've made it into a Sid and Marty Krofft show.
It's okay. So what domain does Hoodoo the Magician lord it over now? Lidsville.
Lidsville's the domain, right?
Lidsville could be a domain. All the people turned into hats and
Oh,
forced
goodness.
to live out these weird lives as headgear. Oh!
Okay.
And I just like the idea of the worlds of Sid and Marty Krofft as the core of Ravenloft. Oh my god.
Land of the Lost could work.
Oh, yeah. And actually, though you mentioned Land of the Lost, that's one of the other nice things about the sort of semi-chaotic nature of Ravenloft is if you come up with a domain and a domain lord that isn't covered, you can put one in there. And I wish I could take credit for this. This was back in the TSR days. I when Alternity was in print, I was pretty active on the TSR chat rooms. And there was a GM there who, for his own Ravenloft campaign, had made his own new land. It was this volcanic island, and it was all just, everything on it was some prehistoric monster. It was dinosaurs, mammoths, things like that. And the domain lord was a fallen ranger who had hunted certain creatures to extinction on his home realm.
Oh, wow.
And so he was the domain lord, and he was sort of this apex predator. The thing was, he knew so much about animals that he couldn't hunt on his own island because there was absolutely no challenge. So the only way he could enjoy the thrill of the hunt was by tricking people to come on the island and hunting them.
Okay, that is a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. I want to do that. That's basically evil Tarzan.
That is
It's the most dangerous game. Yeah.
Oh my god,
yeah,
that's awesome.
It is.
And then the other part of it was just
Brilliant.
like the curse of the land. If you killed him, you proved yourself to be the apex predator, and you immediately became the domain lord.
Well, I'm not so sure about that particular. I think I would want to change that part a little bit, but it's neat. It's a neat twist on it, though. I do like that. You got to be careful about the way you defeat him. You know,
Oh, very true.
something along those lines. Because I think it would be fun to have options there, or some kind of creative way to solve that problem. But it's very neat. And well, we're running out of time here, so let's jump into Daryl. Unless you got anything else you want to go over about running a Ravenloft game, I think I want to jump into final thoughts.
I got a couple of things I want to talk about in Ravenloft games. The first is atmosphere and tone. You really have to keep in mind the group you're playing with, because I've talked a lot about when I said, okay, I'm sick of your bullshit. I'm going to send you to Ravenloft to teach you a lesson. I learned my lesson trying to do that. That doesn't work. You put a bunch of murder hobos in Ravenloft, you're just asking for more pain. You really have to play up the atmosphere. It's supposed to be subtly upsetting at best and downright nightmare fuel, as, you know, that's kind of your baseline for that. You really want to draw in things like music and lighting. You want to keep dim lights. You want to keep kind of creepy, unsettling music. You want Bauhaus playing in the background for the most part. You really want to do, you know, theater of the mind for combat instead of gridded minis, because gridded minis tend to put people in more of a tactical combat situation as opposed to putting them in the world. And you really want that tone to come through. And that's the advice I have for anyone who's wanting to run a Ravenloft. I may be the lone holdout on this, but I actually think that running a game that is set entirely in Ravenloft, like the characters are born. And again, we didn't get to this in Darkon because we skimmed over a lot of stuff, but in Darkon, if you stay there for more than a couple of months, you think you were born in Darkon. And your entire character history before that gets written into a library that Azalon gets to go through and read anytime he feels like it. But if you are born in Ravenloft, I think it actually makes a richer campaign than if you do the Weekend in Hell, like the mists come and take you from Faerun, or comes to take you from Dragonlance or Eberron or wherever, and drops you in Ravenloft for a couple of sessions and then pulls you back out, because it starts to make you think in that paradigm of a thing. And when you warn players in events, hey, I'm going to run a Ravenloft campaign, they're more likely to get on board with the idea of the tone and the atmosphere, where it's, sure, you're going to get some jokes now and then, but it's not going to be a big jokey campaign. At least that's my opinion.
Well, you know, I think it's a fair point to point out, though, that Dungeons and Dragons as a game doesn't tend to lend itself very well to that level of immersion. Most of the time, you know, Dungeons and Dragons is a slightly more casual role-playing experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying I would find it a slightly harder sell, I think.
I think the beauty of it is, and the thing about Ravenloft is that it works on both those different ways. And like so many other things when you're doing role playing, if you find what is suited to you as a GM and you find a group that wants to play that, everyone's going to love it.
So let's actually jump into that right now. Let's talk about our final thoughts on Ravenloft. And Stan, why don't you lead us off with that?
There's still a bunches of things that I have from old Ravenloft modules and a couple of things I'd written that I have just on the shelf to pull in and use in almost any game I run. Like, it doesn't have to be D&D. It doesn't even have to be medieval. This idea of this place where these my version of the powers are sarcastically good, right? Or kind of snide, like they're trying to do good. They're trying to do good in the world by really kicking the shit out of you.
Lawful snarky.
Right. Yeah. So it could be a modern game. It could be a steampunk game where all of a sudden out of nowhere these mists rise up and pull you into this place where horrible things will happen and you'll learn something.
Like
for
an
me,
episode of G.I. Joe.
We all learned something today.
and knowing is half the battle. For me, Ravenloft is the spice. I love the concept. I love that it's there. It's not something that, for as much as I worked on it, which really was a relatively short time over the course of the things I've done. I loved it and I loved the possibilities of it, but it was never, like I said earlier, it's never something I wanted to spend all my time in. And, I found as I go through that it's applicable all over the place. It's such a great concept for putting players out of their comfort zone and giving them something that feels where the stakes have been raised and where when it's done, they can feel like they've accomplished something, or not. They can accomplish something and feel like, oh my God, we never really actually succeeded. And now we've been sent home. And it will haunt them. Like, it really is something that will haunt the characters and the players, and it'll be something they talk about for the rest of the campaign, or hopefully longer.
All right, that's excellent. And I want to jump over to William Thrasher, but at first I got to say, Will, this guy, whoever his name, whoever this unnamed fellow was who came up with this great idea for a Dark Lord in a domain, I am so stealing that.
That is a brilliant idea.
Oh my God, Evil Tarzan is now a thing. I'm just saying.
We'll give him a good creepy name, like Azrak or something like that.
Stoke Gray, or just Lord Stoke or something like that.
Actually, Grey Stoke does sound like the name of a villain.
All right. So, Will, what are your final thoughts on Ravenloft?
My own final thought, and this goes into something that has been very inspirational to me as a game writer. I cannot speak enough praise for the Van Richten's Guide. Every Dracula needs a Van Helsing, so Strahd has Rudolf Van Richten, the herbalist and monster hunter, and an
I
expert.
can't believe we forgot about him. Thank you for remembering to bring him up.
Oh yeah, and there's you can't talk about Ravenloft without talking about him. And back in the day, TSR released this great series of books, these Van Richten's guides. There was like a Van Richten's Guide to Undead, a Van Richten's Guide to the Created, which is all about like golems and flesh golems. And the thing that I love about these books that I always try to emulate is that there is good, solid rules material in them. But they're written in character. They're written as if you are actually going through Van Richten's handwritten journals, and it's full of his observations, his scientific measurements, his musings, and it's like an in-world view of these subjects. And the other thing I love about this is you never know when Van Richten may have made a mistake. What's presented as his scientific observation about how mummies work could be in error. And so it always keeps you guessing as a source book. It gives you these wonderful gaps.
And some of these were written by guys like Nigel Finley, who is just an absolutely immortal writer.
I was just going to say, this is very reminiscent of what happens in most Shadowrun source books,
which were written by Nigel Finley.
I cannot speak highly enough of those books. They are wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they like I said, they were just written by some really excellent guys. You could find some really names we've spoken of before on this show. Skip Williams, etc. So yeah, absolutely, I definitely recommend people going out and finding those. So that's great. But did you have anything else you wanted to add about Ravenloft before we sign off here?
Just that I love horror, and I love a game that lets you explore aspects of classic horror and gothic horror. I guess my own thing is the next time I run Ravenloft, one of my goals is to have two new domains, one sort of inspired by H.P. Lovecraft and another inspired by the works of Edgar Allan Poe, where
nice.
trapped in every Poe story at once. And the domain lord is essentially this mad poet who's pining for a lost love, but that lost love may never have existed. He doesn't know whether he actually loved this lost Lenore person or whether that's just a delusion that the dark powers put into his head. And so he's obsessed with finding out.
That's the thing too about Ravenloft. You can tell different types of stories than your typical
we didn't even talk about Mask of the Red Death, which really
I was about to say that.
That's my. If I'm going to run Ravenloft, it probably will be Mask of the Red Death.
All right, so let's take a couple of minutes. What is Mask of the Red Death?
It's a Victorian. Yeah, it's a Victorian interpretation of Ravenloft. It is not. It's not connected to the fantasy version, except that there are dark powers, which it's hinted are the same, and it's set in the world of the 1890s, with all kinds of references to Poe and other actual Gothic horror of Earth, and it's just a terrific Victorian era horror game.
Okay.
Follow the House of Usher.
Yeah. If you like Cthulhu by Gaslight, that this is a non-Lovecraftian Cthulhu, but it's
all right.
Horror in the 1890s.
Well, I would say
it's terrific.
Thank you for that. I would say my final thoughts about Ravenloft actually changed during the course of this show, because I started out, very much like Stan, where I was like, I don't know if I'd want to do a campaign in it, But the thing about Ravenloft is, the things I love about it is what we talked about earlier. It encourages a different type of play. It allows you to tell different types of stories. It has just some really incredibly memorable characters. And it's a really great concept. I love the whole idea of Ravenloft. The things about what we talked about during this particular show have actually changed my opinion on a little bit. I think I would be more interested in taking a second look at the campaign setting as a place to set a campaign. And I think, we talked about one possible way to do that would be like as a road trip type campaign where you're constantly changing from one part of the realm to another. I would love that. I would adore that. And so I think Ravenloft is a lot deeper than it first appears, actually. It's got a lot going on. It's very imaginative. It's a really fun and interesting look at how to do horror in a D&D specific sort of approach to role-playing. And there's just a lot of awesome bits that you could take from it, even if you never intend to run the game here. There's a lot of bits you could take from, just like the Dark Lords as villains. We did a whole show on villains before. These guys are great for that kind of thing. So even if it's just a resource that you use to spice up your own campaign, it can be very, very good for that. Daryl?
I actually wrote the show notes for this episode, and we've covered maybe a third of what I prepared. Oh my
Daryl
God.
loves Ravenloft. That's the lesson.
I'm about to finish with my Sunday group that I'm doing on Twitch. Forgive me for the blatant promo there, but
it's your show.
We're finishing up the starter set of D&D 5th edition. I'm like, where are we going to go afterwards? Maybe the Mist should take them to Ravenloft. This setting is everything I love, not just about gaming, about fiction. It is good versus evil, but shades of gray are all over the place in this. The best way to run, for example, we brushed over a lot of the different domains. There's domains that range from Stone Age technology to gaslight. There was steampunk in Ravenloft before steampunk was a thing.
Well, I'm sure it was written after the Victorian era. Just saying.
Lemortia was they had 19th century technology. They had steam engines. They had magical automatons. It was like half steampunk, half magitech as we describe them now. But this stuff was written like a decade before those genres became a thing.
So for longtime listeners, they'll notice that this is basically like my favorite campaign setting is Birthright. This Ravenloft right here, this is Daryl's favorite campaign setting.
Yes.
So he feels like this, like I feel about Birthright. All right, I want to make sure our guests get a chance to talk about the things that they are doing and where they can be found on the web. So let's start with Stan. What's your newest thing, Stan, and where can we find out more about you?
Right now I'm doing some work with Viz Media. I do localization for Japanese comics. So I'm working on the last couple of volumes for a series called Dead Man Wonderland and the first couple of volumes for Ultraman.
Nice.
You can find those on bookstore shelves as they come out from Viz Media. You can find me online at stanex.com. That's STANNEX. And I've been picking up a bunch of different cartooning and illustration projects and trying to keep my hand in at Rogue Genius. See, like I said earlier, I've done a lot of stuff and I continue to do a lot of different stuff. You never know where I'm going to pop up next, except Houston's a good bet in a few weeks.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to see if we can get you on the show when we record there at Comicpalooza. Looking forward to it.
And Mr. Stan, I have one request to make.
Yes.
Your Twitter account, your Twitter account is at Stanex, STANNEX.
Yes.
You are at 9,999 tweets.
Make one more. Just make one more.
Can you make can you make your 10,000th tweet that you're on the Gamers Tavern right now?
My 10,000th tweet.
Wow. All right.
Live on
my
air.
10,000th tweet.
Will Thrasher, what is your latest thing, and where can we find out about you on the internet?
All right. Well, you can always see the material that I'm posting online at d-infinity.net. My most recent thing, though, and I just got my contributor copy a few days ago. I contributed material to Heroes of the Wild, which is one of Paizo's latest player companion books.
Cool.
And that was a lot of fun to work on. You can find that, of course, at paizo.com. You can also, I'm sure if you got a friendly local game store, if they don't already have it in, I'm sure they'd be happy to order it for you.
Now, that's for a little game you may not have heard of. It's called Pathfinder.
Indeed, it is for Pathfinder. And that was very, very fun to work on. And if you want to get into specifics, I did most of the herbalism stuff. So that if you like plants and what plants can do for you in games, check that out.
Maybe certain weeds, those certain weeds can do.
Weeds, sages, mushrooms, lots of stuff in there about mushrooms.
All right.
But then as far as what I've got upcoming, of course, you can check out what I'm doing at Comicpalooza. I'll also, with Kettlefish Productions, be running a lot of LARPs at Origins and Gen Con this year. And then as far as publications, I am currently doing the layouts on a book that I co-authored and illustrated, 100 Oddities for a Post-Apocalyptic Wasteland.
Nice.
And just grab a D100, roll on this, and it will give you some weird object, anomaly, or phenomenon that you can use to spice up your post-apocalyptic game.
I recommend you just walk away. Leave the precious juice behind. I promise you safe passage in the wasteland.
I can neither confirm nor deny whether or not we have anything on the table that is a reference to that classic movie.
Okay, well, we're all going to be at Comicpalooza. You can find out more about what's going on with me at evilbeaglegames.com and therosswatson.com. And Daryl, of course, has his tabletop article that goes up on ain'titcoolnews.com.
Yep. By the time this goes up, I should have an interview with Felicia Day.
Speaking of that, the bartender is looking at me and giving me the nod, so we're going to have to close it down here. And for all the listeners, thank you again for supporting us here at the Gamers Tavern. On behalf of Daryl and myself, I want to extend our gratitude to our guests, Stan and William Thrasher. Thank you so much for coming on the show, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And this has been a great episode about Ravenloft. So until next time, may all your hits be crits.
Are you looking for a new game to play? Drive-Thru RPG is the internet's largest source of role-playing games. Enjoy our game table episodes with Shadowrun, Dungeons & Dragons, or Mutants and Masterminds and you want to join in? Or is World of Darkness, Battletech, or Fate more your thing? Or maybe you just want to check out games from our guests like Accursed and Shinetar, the Savage World settings. Just go to gamerstavern.org/drive-through-RPG and you can have a new game to play in minutes. And they also have the largest selection of free games, source books, and starter sets anywhere in the world. Go to gamerstavern.org/drive-through-RPG and support the show with every purchase.